Hello and welcome to Writer Rant, author advice in 5 minutes or less because I've got to get back to writing and so do you. So this week I want to talk a little bit about build-up and payoff. This kind of ties a little bit to what I was talking about last week with romance and erotica. Like romance kind of builds up, that eventual sex scene, whereas erotica is just like, bam, let's get to it. Now this isn't necessarily for those genres, this is kind of in general. There's times where in your plot, like you're leading to something. A lot of times you have some good foreshadowing, or you have a strong goal that your main character has. Those are kind of things where it's kind of that build-up. It's like, okay, hey, they're getting a little closer to their goal. They're getting a little further along in their journey. But sometimes, if you kind of keep delaying that payoff, obviously, you want to at least resolve it by the end, but sometimes you need kind of little victories along the way, little, like, oh, hey, you smack them up against a wall and like, I don't know what to do, and then, they struggle through it, they grow as a character, and then, hey, they're, back on track, they're back towards their goal. It's that kind of build-up that's pretty good. But it's the ones where it's like, okay, so, like, the very first scene of the book, you have this character who's just like, oh, I saw this girl and I immediately fell in love. And I'm like, okay, well, you immediately fell in love. Where do you go from there? Obviously, okay, you got to woo her and all that kind of stuff. But if you have a lot of other subplots going on where it's just like, well, I'm also, going to college, I'm trying to earn a degree, but like I got all this other stuff going on. It's like, well, that's, a little more realistic to real life. Narrative-wise, it kind of drags. Your multiple storylines, you can interweave them. Brandon Sanderson does a pretty good job of this, at least what I read in the Stormlight Archive series, where he's got a number of different characters, and you kind of follow each one, but in each section, there's usually, there might be some action, there might be some rest or whatever, some exposition, but there's usually at least a good progression of at least one of the storylines has kind of a really juicy, like, hey, here's kind of a little bit of payoff. Not like full payoff, not, oh, hey, they've finally achieved their goal. But, it's kind of that slow build. But also, it's keeping that pace, keeping that going forward. And so when you're looking at some of your early stuff in your writing, say, okay, you got a scene, and it's like, oh, hey, I really like the scene because of whatever reason, but if it really doesn't add to the greater narrative, maybe you need to cut it. So this is kind of a rant against fluff, right? Because it's like, okay, hey, if you're kind of delaying your build-up, if you're delaying your payoff, readers might lose interest. Case in point, I'm beta reading a book right now, and it's like, okay, the main character is kind of obnoxious, and I don't really like being in his head, but again, I'm kind of forcing my way through it. Now, about halfway through, about 45 to 50% of the way through this book, it starts getting really good, and we start actually seeing some payoff from things that were set up, long ago at the beginning of the book or somewhere in the middle. The trick is just like, man, it took me like half the book to get there, and are people going to want to read like halfway through your book to actually get to something that's actually a bit of a payoff? Like, I probably, if I was reading it normally, I would have put it down. Now, granted, it's in a genre that I don't really read normally, so I had to kind of get used to it. But you got to add some little bit of payoff. Just kind of string them along, string on the readers to say, hey, here's something really cool. Hey, the character kind of overcame this kind of thing, or they turned a corner. And I get it that sometimes you want to like hold off on all of that for like this great big twist ending, and that works sometimes, but again, you got to kind of give your readers something to kind of nibble on, to bring them along, kind of bait them through your story. So what do you think as a writer? Do you think you should save your entire novel and just be build up and then have one huge moment of payoff, or should you drop your payoffs kind of throughout the narrative? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Curious what to hear what you think about it. If there's anything else that you readers, writers, reviewers don't like that's going on right now in the book world, by all means drop a comment below, and maybe it'll be a future episode of Writer Rant. So thanks for watching this episode of Writer Rant. I'm Benjamin M. Weilert.